Hi, everyone. Like I said, I think we're waiting for a few more folks to join in with us here today, but we'll get going. My name is Meg. I'm the marketing manager for Rose City Rollers, and I'm joined by Deb of Welcome to PDX. She is our real estate sponsor, and she's fabulous, very knowledgeable, has helped many a Derby folk buy or sell a house, myself included. So I can definitely attest to her knowledge and her skill in that department. And we'll be covering a number of topics today that Deb will go over, from what to look for when you're thinking about buying a home to what's going on with the market to all kinds of things. But I'll pass it over to you, Deb, and let you take it from there.
Okay. Thank you so much, Meg. I appreciate it. Because I can't see anybody, I'm just going to keep a close eye on the chat. So if you've got questions, I'm just going to open it up there so I've got it next to me. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and I'll answer them just as soon as you put them up. Normally when I do this, I kind of do a home buying 101 where it's very much here are the steps for purchasing a new home, because that's my niche market is first time buyers. But because the market has been in such flux in the last 6 months, I kind of wanted to kind of go over that first, and do it without my usual slideshow and stuff so that I can answer questions about what's happening in the market. I have been doing this since 2006. I got my license in 2006. I love it more every day. This is the best job ever in the world for me. It's exactly what I love. Uh, love doing, love putting people in homes, love helping people get to the right place for them and helping people get out of homes that no longer work for them. So it's been a joy to do. And I got my license in Oregon in 2006, as I said, and then in Washington in 2015, so that I can go across the river, because it's such a simple drive for most people that I've had quite a few people want to look on that side too. So I am your both sides of the river person. Uh, so in the last, thank you so much, Meg. In the last 6 months, as I'm sure everybody's aware, the feds did exactly what I've said for years needed to happen in order to change the market. Over the last 4 years, people have said, "Hey, are we buying in a bubble? Is it going to collapse like it did in 2008? These prices seem untenable. This timeline seems untenable. What are we going to do? What's happening? Is this a bubble?" Everybody's favorite question. And what I've said for years is that what we had in terms of pricing in Portland was simple supply and demand, basic econ 101. If you've got two bakers in town, one baker in town, they can charge whatever they want for a loaf of bread. The more bakers you add, the lower the price goes until you get to a point that's reasonable for everybody. Um, with homes, we had no inventory, so we had high prices. Lots of people wanting to buy, lots of people, not a lot of people selling their homes means no inventory, means the prices go up. So we could either increase supply, which means building more houses, which Portland is not great at doing on a quickness. It's too expensive, and there's not enough room with the urban growth boundary to get enough people in. Uh, or we can reduce demand, which is get people to stop moving to Portland or raise the interest rates so that people would be less interested in purchasing. And that's what they did. And that's exactly what happened. So as soon as the interest rates went up past 5%, the market went braked to a stop, just like you tip your heel, tip your feet and stop real fast. And it really has made a huge difference. Inventory went from what we call inventory in the market is if we stopped selling houses today or stopped listing houses today at the rate that we're purchasing them, how long would it take to sell every house that's currently on the market? It's a weird metric, but it's what they use. So inventory in the summer or in early spring of last year was less than a month. It would take less than a month to sell every house on the market if we stopped today. That has climbed to, just a second, I inspections. That has climbed in the last little bit to 2 days to a month. We've got a month and a tenth, I believe, a month and month 0.2. So it doesn't seem like a lot, and it's still not a lot of inventory, but it's better than it was. So what that means for buyers in a wonderful way is that prices are coming down and the market is not quite so insanely hot. So in the last 3 years, what you had to do to purchase a house was be there the minute it went on the market, know you were going to have to write your offer over the list price, compete against a bunch of other people, and probably waive a bunch of stuff, like waive your inspections, waive your appraisal, write to an appraisal, or cover the gap on the appraisal, which not everybody has that kind of cash. So buyers in the last few years, especially first-time buyers and folks with harder income, at harder income levels, were just priced out of the market entirely. You couldn't compete with that. And if you could, it was exhausting. So you would put in 9 or 10 offers before you got something. That has 180 degrees changed. You can take your time. You can go out and look at properties. Things are sitting on the market. 30 days plus is not uncommon right now, which means you as a buyer, first-time buyers, definitely have the ability to go in there and write for less than the list price. I just wrote an offer the other day on a house that was 750. It had started at 775, was down to 750, and we wrote at 730, 725, and they countered to 737, and we took it. Still considerably less than what they had listed it at. And we're getting seller concessions towards closing costs, which you would never have been able to do 6 months ago. So what's stopping buyers right now is fear of those interest rates. So that interest rate that was 3% 6 months ago got to 7 in November. And at that point, people were just like, I can't do this. This is absolutely undoable. But because you're writing an offer for less than the list price, it actually comes out about the same as it would have 2 years ago or a year ago, where you were writing an offer considerably over the list price. Even though you were paying less interest, you were paying more for the house itself. So I feel like from the buying side, this is a great market to be in, because you can write for less, pay a little bit more in interest, but then refinance as soon as the interest rates drop. And they're already dropping. They would today 6%. One of my best lenders got somebody in at 5.99 yesterday. So we are seeing some definite softening of that, which is great. So I hate the phrase buy the house and date the rate, but it's what you'll hear out there. So it's what is a great idea. If you can buy the house now and refinance. Also, a lot of lending companies, I'm getting emails every day from lenders saying, we will, if you get your loan with us at 7% or 6%, then and refinance within the next 3 years, we will waive the fees for refinancing, because they're desperate to get people in the door. So that is not a bad thing. That definitely will save you some cash down the road too, because your closing costs from refinancing can run around $5,000. And if they're going to waive those fees, then absolutely you should do that. Okay, so any questions so far? We're doing okay?
I think we just have the intrigue of the audience right now.
Awesome.
But yes.
Okay. Just making sure. Okay. So if you're on the selling side, it's a little rougher, not going to lie. Definitely not the expectations that you would have had 6 months ago or a year ago, where you could put the house on the market and it would sell in 2 days and you wouldn't have to do anything to it. You could get it over list price. I'm very careful about not blowing smoke up people's butts and being honest about what I think a house will sell for and what I think it will appraise for, given the sales around it. It's a little harder to do that right now, because normally I would go out 3 months. 3 months ago, well, 3 months ago, the market was starting to turn. So not a bad thing. But I will be super honest with you about what I think will happen in terms of how long it'll sit and how long it'll what it will sell for, how much over it will sell for. I'm not the kind of agent who buys the listing, and I would recommend that you meet with, more than one agent, definitely, but don't let somebody tell you that the house is worth more than it is, because any agent can put their sign up. I don't want to just put my sign up in front of your house. I want to actually sell your house. That's my job, not to list it, but to sell it. So that's the goal anyway. Um, I am, I know it's hard for people to do a lot of work to a place when they're selling it. So I try not to be, we have to come in and do this and this and this and all these things that are going to cost a fortune to get your house ready to sell. But I definitely will say, I think that you should, repaint this room or work on these countertops. Absolutely, Chloe. Um, the it's it's important to approach this with that honesty, with a sense of we're both working on the same thing to get your house sold. And that means that sometimes you have to hear stuff that you don't want to hear. And you'll always get that from feedback from buyers. Unfortunately, it's one of the hard parts of selling a house is that this house is your house and you love this house. Even if you can't stand it and you're ready to get out of it, you still have an attachment to it. And so when you're getting feedback from buyers and buyers agents, they're going to say things that you don't want to hear. And my job is to make that as palatable as possible and gentle that hit if I can, and then to get the house sold so that you don't have to sit through it. So it's it's a little more difficult to sell now than it was 6 months ago, though. Unfortunately, this is just the nature of the industry and the nature of where we are right now. And it will swing back up again. But if you're getting ready to sell, definitely be patient. Um, we used to have a cyclical real estate used to be cyclical, where you would have the spring market and things would be very busy from February to July. And then a lot of closings in July. August would be very slow because people who looked in the spring either got a house or were exhausted and tired of it and wanted a month off. And people were finishing up vacations. And then we'd start again in October. So, like, my two busiest close months are July and December. My December calendar is just as full of house anniversaries as my July calendar is, because people start up again in October and have a place and are ready to go by the end of December. We haven't had that cycle for 3 years now. It just has never stopped. It's just been super busy all the time with no slowdown. Now we have that slowdown again. And I think that, like, I'm putting up a listing in just a couple of days because people are out, needs to be listed. But there is a lot of discussion. Do you wait until after the holidays or do you list it before the holidays? And at this point, I think if we put it up, people could be in their new home by the end of the year. And I think that's a good selling point. But for a bigger place, maybe you do want to wait until after the first of the year. The spring season that used to start in February, mid February to March, the last few years, if there's been any break at all, my joke has been that the spring season starts the first warm weekend in January where the sun is out. So that's the beginning of your spring market, first warm weekend in January. After that, it's just hit the ground running. I think that it will be a more traditional spring market this year. We'll probably wait a little bit. A lot of that depends on what interest rates do. If they stay on the drop, that will ramp back up again. So not a bad thing for sellers. Not as great a thing for buyers, but hopefully we can keep it at some balance. That's what we want to have, is a balanced market where it's not just on the sellers and it's not just on buyers. So it's been interesting. It's been a ride for sure for everybody, but it's definitely not the end of the world market. It's still it is still a good time to buy. If you can get in there with that interest rate, it's fantastic because you've got no competition or less competition and way more ability to get the things that you need as a buyer. So unless there are questions that I can answer, I'm just going to keep going and talk about the kind of the process of the sale and then the process of the purchase. And if you go to my website, which is welcome to PDX.com, there are 2 tabs, one for home buying 101 and one for home selling 101, so that you can kind of get an idea of what happens next. For home selling, I'll come over, we'll talk about what needs to be done in the house. We'll talk about the market and what it looks like the comparable sales around your home are. And we'll not assign paperwork immediately, actually talk about what needs to be done. If you have small work that needs to be done, I've got great handy folks that I can get in to get the small stuff taken care of. If it's bigger things, then we'll have that discussion. We can talk about whether you want to pre-inspect or not. Sometimes in a really, really strong buyer's market, doing pre-inspection for folks is not a bad idea, especially for the things that are definite seller repair items. So like sewers and radon, where they're definitely going to ask the seller to fix these things, we might as well spend the $300 and pre-test it just to get that gets buyers in the door because they know they don't have to take care of it. So we'll
So I
go
think
ahead.
people are still contemplating, but I was curious.
Yeah.
Also for the audience, if you are more in the buyers group or prospective buyers or prospective sellers, feel free to drop that in the chat as well, and we can sort of address things that are specific to either of those scenarios.
Absolutely.
So I was curious though, with the rates being what they are for buyers right now, would you say like a good approach would be if you find a house that you really love, even though the rates are kind of high, going for it and then refinancing in short order as they drop, or what is the best sort of approach for finding a better interest rate if you find a house that you love, but the interest rates aren't that great?
Right now, if they're about 6%, like I said, there are lenders all over the place sending me emails every day saying, if you use us to purchase the house and you end up refinancing in the next 3 years because the rate gets better, we will waive the fees for that. So that saves you about $5,000 in closing costs on your refinance down the road. So not a bad idea at all. And if your lender, whoever you've chosen, doesn't do that, ask them if they will. Doesn't hurt to do that at all. So you can purchase now at 6%, and in a year when it's dropped to 5 or 4, refinance to get that better interest rate and save yourself that earnest or that down payment, that closing cost. So yeah, but definitely if you see something that you like now and you can get it and you can afford it, I would definitely do it because this is a great time to jump on that. And interest rates are definitely already moving. So moving down again from the 7% that they were at last month, which is good. So on the selling side, we'll go through all of the paperwork, figure out what needs to be done, and you have to get, we have to do 2 things. We need to get photography and floor plans because everybody loves a floor plan. It's so much easier to tell what a house looks like when there's a floor plan attached to the photos. And we have to do in Portland, Hillsborough, and Milwaukee a home energy score. So that's the audit that tells what the carbon footprint of the house is. So a little bit that I pay for, a little bit that you pay for, and then as soon as those are done, we can list the house. You don't have to be in or out of the house to make that happen. You can be living in your home while it's being sold. There's quite a bit that's involved in it, but I just want you to know that I do work with sellers just as much as I do buyers. And if you have questions about selling, I'm happy to answer those questions too. I know all of my classes so far have been about the buying process, because that's usually where people are, but selling is also a process, and I'm addressing that for folks too. Okay. On the buyer side, you want to get pre-approved first, even before you choose your agent, because no matter how good I am at my job, if you don't know how much you can afford or what you are approved for, it doesn't do us any good. We can't go out and look at stuff because, well, it's a little less busy now. Before, you couldn't write an offer without a pre-approval letter attached to it because they have 5 other offers, and some of those already and those all already have their pre-approval. Now you might be able to write an offer and not have the pre-approval yet, but I would rather you be pre-approved so that you know how much you can afford, and don't get in there, write an offer, and then discover suddenly that you can't afford that house. And that's easy enough to do. And there's some great lenders on the Welcome to PDX page. Have not updated it yet, but I'm updating it to make a change. One, Jen Leon has moved from Umpqua Bank to Guild. And two, I met a new lender, John Werner, who works not just with people with lower credit scores, but can work with folks with credit scores under 600 to get them into homes. The interest rate is higher, no question about it, but he helped me to get a young couple into a house in October where the credit scores were not great. There were a lot of late payments, but the finances were there to cover it. And the interest rate that they came in at is 12%, which is outrageously high when you think about it, but doable for them. Their monthly payment was low enough that, because they had sold a house to bring in a big down payment, their monthly payment was low enough that they could afford it. And then as soon as the interest rates drop, they'll be able to refinance that because they will have gotten their credit up, and they'll refinance it down to a rate that will take $1,000 a month off of their monthly payment, which is going to be fantastic for them. So just because your credit score is not great, don't think that it can't be done, because it can. This sometimes takes a little more work doing what we call a non-qualifying mortgage or non-qualifying loan. So I'm going to be putting John's info up there as well, and he's great for folks who are not entirely sure that they can do this. The other reason that I say get your lender scheduled first is because if you aren't ready to purchase, a good lender is going to be honest with you about that. And not only are they going to tell you you're not ready yet, they're going to tell you what you need to do to get ready. A bad lender is just going to say, I can't help you. I'm sorry. But my good lenders will say, I can't help you right now, but here's how to fix your credit. Here's how to pay your bills. Like literally, they'll tell you pay these bills first, then these bills, so that you're ready to go. And I've had folks go away and come back 3 years later with their credit scores increased by 100 points and be 100% ready to purchase. So it's definitely doable. And then once you have your lender in place, then we get to start looking for houses. And that is the fun part. I've got a whole wall full of little dots that show places that are places that I have worked, and I do everything from Banks to Sandy, Woodburn to Woodland. So, and I actually will go all the way to Kelso Longview, because there's a lot in Kelso Longview that's affordable if you could go that high up. So, right. Not sure if people have questions. Give everybody a second.
Yeah.
And I can go through the whole home buying 101 part as well. But I know that people's questions mostly were about the market this time around. So getting pre-approved is step one. Then we start looking for houses. After we've found you the right house, you need to have, I would say, everybody's other question is, how much do I need to have to buy a house? So in the first 10 days, you need to have 1% of the price of the house for your earnest money. So if you're buying a $450,000 house, say $5,000 earnest money. Your earnest money is a piece of your down payment that is paid up front in that first 3 days that says to the seller, yes, I'm serious about buying your house. You get that back if you back out because of an inspection issue or if your lending falls apart. Otherwise, the seller gets to keep it. That's their gift for taking their house off the market for a month while you changed your mind, if you change your mind. Okay. So it has to be something that you can afford to give up just in case you don't get it back again. You also need to have about $1,000 all in for inspections. So that's stuff that can't be paid out of closing. That all has to be paid up front to the inspectors. So it's $150 for radon, $150 for a sewer scope, maybe $75 if we need to do asbestos testing, and anywhere between $6 and $8 for the general inspection. And then there are additional things that can be added to that, but always sewer scope, radon, and general inspection have to be done, right? So 1% of your closing costs, or 1% of the cost of the house plus $1,000 you want to have upfront ready to go. And then another roughly $1,000 to be put on your credit card to pay for the appraisal. And that we won't schedule until after inspection's done so that you're not paying for an appraisal that you don't use, right? And then the rest of it, which is your down payment and your closing costs, you don't have to have in hand until closer to closing time. So your down payment can be anywhere from 3% to whatever you want it to be, 20%, 25%, whatever you have in cash, plus your closing costs. And on an average home or a median home in Portland, around $516,000, the closing costs would be about $10,000. And that is your loan origination fee, which is the money that you pay to your lender, and then all of the different fees for doing things that go to title companies mostly, and to the county for recording. So let's see. You do not pay me on the buyer's side yet. We're getting closer and closer to that. Right now, the way Oregon works and the way Washington works is that the seller's agent has a contract with the seller to make a certain amount of money, and then they split that certain amount of money with whoever brings the buyers. It's a weird system. Until the 1990s, buyer's agents weren't a thing at all. If you wanted to buy a house, you would go directly to the agent who was listing the house, and you would buy it from them, and they would do dual agency where they supported both the buyer and the seller at the same time. Sometimes, quite often, to the detriment of the buyer, because that's not who their contract was with, and they didn't have their best interests at heart necessarily, which is why buyer's agency became a thing, so that buyers would come in protected with somebody to back them up. I feel that should have been at that time, that buyer's agents were paid by the buyers and the seller's agents were paid by the sellers. That is starting to become more of a thing. But as of right now, you don't need to worry about figuring that percentage in to your closing costs. At some point in the probably very near future, that will need to be considered in buyer's closing costs as well. But for right now, it's not. So when you ask what does it cost to hire an agent on the buyer's side, the answer is nothing up front, because you're paying for it as part of your loan. What you're paying the seller covers the cost of paying me and the agent on the seller's side.
Could you explain that a little bit more, just in terms of how that would work with buyers paying their own agents if it's not coming out of the purchase of the house?
If it's, it would be considered a closing cost. So where right now closing costs, like I said, you're paying the title company for doing their job, you're prepaying your taxes, you're prepaying your um, first, you're prepaying interest, you're prepaying your first year of homeowners insurance, you're paying the lender, you're paying the county. You would also pay your agent in those closing costs. So it would just be written into that. You would put that into the escrow with the title company or with the escrow company, and then they would write checks out to us just like they do now.
Would
Just
that
would
still be based off of a percentage of the sale price, or
it would be based on, it would be based on the sale price usually, and we can't say there's an average, it's changeable. So you, it would be a conversation you would have with your buyer's agent. How much are you willing to pay them to do this? So yeah, and that's where we would sit down and discuss it. Absolutely. And Chloe, you asked if there was an average closing cost or if it varied significantly. It's based a lot on, it varies because there are different factors. One part of the closing cost is again, the loan origination fee. So if you have a $700,000 house, what you pay the lender is different than if you have a $300,000 house, because it's a percentage of that. The title company fees are all roughly the same in the $1,000 to $1,500 range. And that's a ton of little, I hate to call them junk fees because they all have their point, but it pays them for as title search, it pays them for recording fees, it pays them for all kinds of stuff. It is, real estate math is the worst. And then you're also prepaying a year of homeowners insurance. So it depends on who your who insurance is through, and did you add extra coverage for like flood or earthquake, because that'll change your cost as well. And then the taxes on the property will change. And also when in the tax year you close will change your closing costs, because, and this is a weird, this is fun real estate math. The tax year in Portland is July 1st to June 30th, right? But we don't get our tax bills until November. So for those 4 months, we're all in arrears. Okay. Everybody in the county. In November, you get your bill and you pay it for July through June. So you're paying back and then you're paying up. So if you close your house here in January, you have to pay back the seller for what they paid for June through January through June. And you have to put enough into the escrow account to, so that when the bill comes due again in November, it can pay all the way back through July. So when you close in the year makes a difference on how much taxes you have to prepay. It's a very confusing process, but that's why it varies so significantly. So I think that answers those questions. It is not the easiest thing, but we have really great escrow people who explain it and explain it well, so that you can know exactly what you're paying, and you'll get a bunch of different pieces of paper that explain to you what you're paying and what you're not, and we'll get it. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Jesse. She's got to love those tax prorations. It's definitely challenging to get it, but once you've got it, it makes sense. And then it's less confusing, but you have to really think about it for a few minutes. And it's like, what am I paying and when is it due? Because your lender always wants to hold enough money in what they call your impound account or your escrow account or your holdback account. Has a bunch of different names, and that's part of why it gets confusing, because you've got escrow and you've got your escrow account, and they're two different companies. So the lender always wants to hold enough so that when your taxes come due and when your insurance comes due, they can pay those bills. and they've got enough money to do that. So when you're making your monthly payment, what you're paying is principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, PITI. So you're not just paying your bill, you're paying for all of those things as well. And you can't not do them. Your lenders won't allow you to not pay your taxes and not pay your insurance, because that puts their property, which is the house is technically the lender's property, in jeopardy. So they want to make sure that you keep it covered with insurance. They want to make sure that you've paid your taxes. And so they pay those bills to make sure that you do. So they will always want to make sure they've got that cash available. At some point when you purchase a home, at some point your taxes are going to go up every year, and so is your insurance. So that amount that they need to hold back will go up and will change. So pretty soon they will have used all of those bits up, and they will say, hey, we don't have enough cushion in here. Please write us a check or have your monthly payment go up. You can do whichever works best for you, but that will be when that changes. So your principal and interest should never change unless you refinance, but your taxes, insurance will always go up, and that's what will make the change in your monthly payment down the road. So quite often your monthly payment goes up a tiny bit, and it's really literally just a $10 increase, but that makes them happy. So, or you can just write them a big check. They don't care either way. Okay, let's see. Taxes, big ones. The timeline of closing. Most people like to know about how long that's going to take. That's always a big question. A lot of it depends on you as the buyer. How much time do you have to look at houses? How picky are you about what you're looking for? Are you looking for a unicorn, or do you have, something more cookie cutter in mind? If I took you out today, today's the 7th of December. If we took you out today, we could probably have you with some rush in a new house by the end of the year. So it would not be the easiest thing in the world to do to have it closed before the end of December, but it would be doable with the right lender. And that's part of the reason that when I say use one of the lenders that I recommend, not because I'm getting a deal from them or anything, but because I know these people and they're local. And if they're not local, like John's not, he's based in Arizona. But if they're not local, even if they're not local, I know they get done what they say they'll get done. And that's hugely important. It's one of the reasons that your lender is the most important part of this deal, is because I can find you the best house in the world. But if you have a lender that can't close on time, it's not going to do us any good, or a lender who can't close at all. And that happens sometimes, if especially with the big banks, I hate to say this, but especially with the big bank box banks, I just add automatically 2 weeks to what they say they're going to close at. So that we know, it's like, this is just the expectation. Know that it's going to be 2 weeks late. Unfortunately, if we don't set that expectation with sellers, and they think we're going to close on January 15th, and the bank delays it and then delays it again and then delays it again, at some point the seller can say, we're not going to do that anymore. We're not going to extend it anymore. You have to close, or we're going to put it back on the market because we have other people who are interested in it. So I want to have a lender who is local enough, or someone that I know well enough that I can go and sit at their desk if something goes wrong. If for some reason we have a delay, I want to be able to go to their office and talk to their supervisor and say, what is going on? So that's the reason for that, because quite often on the online lenders especially, all you get is a recording. You never actually get to talk to a live person, and if you do, it's very surprising. And I've actually had online lenders based in Florida, an online lender once based in Florida, where the only way that they could get their closing costs sent to Oregon to them so that they could close was to fly to Florida, get the check, and fly back to Portland. They would not, the bank would not release funds or do a wire transfer without the person actually being physically in the bank. And I was like, that, yeah, it was, getting that closed was not the easiest thing in the world, but we did get it closed. It just took a lot of phone calls. And, you know, that's what I do. I sit in my office and I make phone calls to figure out what can I do to fix this problem. And that's, I think, probably the biggest part of what I do is sitting in my office, not letting the buyers or sellers know when there's an issue, but sitting in my office and fixing the issue before they ever find out about it. That's what I want to do. So that is my goal as your agent and as an agent. So that's a good place to let it go unless there are questions.
I'm personally a little bit curious if you have any recommendations or like industry tips for people who are buying their first home and maybe don't have a ton of liquid cash on hand. Are there still first time homebuyers incentives? Anything else that people can use?
There were not 6 months ago. There are more now. Unfortunately, those programs, especially down payment assistance programs, come in and go out really quickly as they gain and lose funding. But definitely approach me if you think you don't have enough, because we can figure things out. Like, a lot of them depend on where you purchase. If there's, you know, if you're looking in a specific neighborhood, I know that at one point the city was doing, like, Gresham had some specific areas and Portland had some specific areas where they would help with down payment assistance. Again, those programs phase in and out as they have funding. So I can't send you to one specific place, unfortunately. But it does exist. So don't panic. And honestly, as long as you've got a minimum of 3%, you can do it. 3% down is the minimum. So, and that's for an FHA loan. It's definitely doable. So, and gift funds count too. So,
Yeah, maybe we can let it simmer for a sec, just in case
yeah,
anybody else has some
absolutely.
more questions. I'm also sort of curious, and this is maybe branching off a little bit from the real estate fields, but once you own a home, is there any like energy incentives or rebates or things like that that you would recommend people keep an eye out for?
I do. I would keep an eye on the page at Energy Trust of Oregon, and they will come in and energy do a whole energy workup on your home and help you figure out where you're losing energy and what to do to make it better. Everything from replacing your furnace to fixing your windows to insulate, better insulation. And then also help you figure out where the rebates are on that. I know that I'm pretty sure that the state gives rebates still for upgrading windows. So that's always helpful. And then I know that one of the things that's on my website is under other links is a link to Amanda Sprinkling Felt with True Home Inspections. She has a list of queer, BIPOC, and women owned vending companies. So everything from painting to plumbing to everything in between. So if you need an architect, if you need landscaping, everything is on there, and it's all folks broken down by who owns the company. So it's a wonderful, wonderful resource. Really helpful.
Awesome.
Yeah, and you all have my contact info, but if you don't, put it in chat so that if anybody doesn't have it, they've got it. And again, I'm licensed in Oregon and Washington, so no worries about jumping across the river.
And just so everyone knows, we did record this session and we'll be posting it to our YouTube and to our website and probably sharing on social media. So even if you know folks who wanted to sit in on this but didn't have a chance to, that resource will also be available to them.
I've also got on the website one of the old ones that I did a couple of years ago that is more of the home buying 101. That's very much the step-by-step guide. So if you want to look there too, that's also available.
Awesome.
Yay.
Well, thanks for
Wonderful.
joining us today, everybody, and hopefully get some good info. Definitely reach out to Deb if you have more real estate questions.
Yay. Thank you guys so much for having me. Absolutely.
All
Chloe,
right.
thank you so much. It was my pleasure. Glad to help.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.